The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines and 40 year. Old Claire Ashford felt the entire world collapse beneath her feet. She stood in the locked bathroom of her corner office on the 32nd floor, her hands trembling so violently that the small plastic stick clattered against the marble sink. The baby wasn't her husband's. It couldn't be. Richard hadn't touched her in over a year. The baby belonged to Ethan Cole, her 18-year-old summer intern. The boy she had sworn she would never fall for, the boy whose deep blue eyes had somehow dismantled every wall she had ever built. And in exactly 45 minutes, Ethan was scheduled to walk into her office for his weekly one-on-one meeting, completely unaware that their secret had just grown a heartbeat. Claire gripped the edge of the sink and stared at her reflection. Her bright green eyes, usually warm and crinkled with easy laughter, were now wide with raw terror. Her wavy auburn hair, normally falling softly past her shoulders, was pulled back in a messy knot she didn't remember making. The small silver locket around her neck, the one her late mother had given her, felt heavier than it ever had before. She was the CEO of Ashford and Wren Marketing, a company she had built from a spare bedroom and a laptop into a 200-person empire.
So graceful, yet so
She was respected. She was admired. And she was about to lose absolutely everything. Because Richard Ashford wasn't just her husband. He was the company's largest investor, the man whose family money had funded the first 3 years of growth, and the man who had written an ironclad prenuptial agreement, ensuring that if Claire ever committed infidelity, she would walk away with nothing. Not the company, not the house, not even her dignity. And Richard Ashford was not the kind of man who forgave. It had started 3 months earlier, on a sweltering Monday in June. Claire had been reviewing RA Sum A's for the summer internship program, a task she usually delegated, but had taken on herself after firing her assistant for leaking confidential client data. The stack was unremarkable. Ivy League overachievers with polished cover letters and predictable ambitions. And then she opened Ethan Cole's application. No university listed. No family connections. No polished language. Just a raw, honest letter from an 18-year-old who had graduated high school while working 2 jobs to support his younger sister, after their father died and their mother disappeared into addiction. He had taught himself graphic design from YouTube tutorials and built a freelance portfolio that was, frankly, better than the work her junior designers were producing. Attached was a photo for the company ID badge. A strikingly handsome young man with a sharp jawline, high cheekbones, warm olive skin, and dark brown hair that fell in thick, slightly wavy layers. His deep blue eyes stared directly into the camera with an intensity that made Claire pause mid-sip of her coffee. She hired him immediately. She told herself it was because of his talent. Ethan's first day was a disaster in the most charming way possible. He showed up in dark jeans, a fitted black t-shirt, and a leather jacket despite the 90-degree heat, because he later confessed he didn't own business casual clothing and thought looking sharp was better than looking appropriate. He accidentally walked into the women's restroom, spilled an entire iced coffee on the reception desk, and then, in his very first hour, redesigned a landing page mock-up that the senior design team had been struggling with for 2 weeks. Claire's creative director showed her Ethan's work with a look of stunned disbelief. "Where did you find this kid?" he asked. Claire just smiled, her round, freckled cheeks flushing slightly. "He found us." She assigned Ethan to the creative bullpen on the 14th floor, far from her 32nd floor office. Distance, she told herself. appropriate professional distance. But the universe, or perhaps something more deliberate, kept pulling them together. It was the elevator that started it. The building had 6 elevators, but somehow Claire and Ethan kept ending up in the same one, always at odd hours. Late evenings, when she was leaving after marathon strategy sessions. Early mornings, when he arrived before anyone else to use the design software he couldn't afford at home. They would stand on opposite sides of the small mirrored box, and the silence between them would hum with something neither of them named. The first real conversation happened on a Wednesday night. Claire was the last person on the 32nd floor, sitting on the carpet of her office, with takeout containers spread around her, because she couldn't face going home to Richard's cold silence. She heard a knock and looked up to find Ethan standing in her doorway, his leather jacket slung over one shoulder, the small compass tattoo on his inner wrist catching the light. "I saw your light on," he said. "I was going to leave, but I thought maybe you shouldn't be alone up here this late." She should have thanked him and sent him home. Instead, she said, "Do you like pad thai?" He sat down across from her on the carpet, and they talked for 3 hours.
I drew
He
something
told
for
her
you.
about his
Oh,
father,
really? Let's see.
a mechanic who
Here
had
it
died
is.
of a heart
Oh
attack
my gosh, it's me.
when Ethan was
I love it.
15,
I'm glad you like it.
leaving behind nothing but debt and a vintage watch that Ethan now wore on his wrist every single day. He told her about his sister, Lily, who was 14 and brilliant, and who Ethan was determined to send to college, no matter what it cost him. He told her about his mother, who had been sober for 6 months before relapsing the day after his high school graduation, and how he had come home to find her unconscious on the kitchen floor with Lily screaming beside her. Claire listened with tears streaming silently down her soft, fair cheeks, and when he finished, she told him something she had never told anyone at the company. She told him about the miscarriage she'd had 3 years ago, and how Richard had responded by saying, "Maybe it's for the best. We're not really parent material," and how she had felt something inside her marriage die that day. Something that no counselor or vacation or amount of pretending could ever resurrect. He said that. Ethan's blue eyes darkened to stormy gray. "That's not something you say to someone you love." "No," Claire whispered. "It's not." The air between them changed. She felt it physically, like a shift in atmospheric pressure before a storm. Ethan reached across the takeout containers and took her hand. His fingers were warm and slightly calloused from years of manual work, and when they closed around hers, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in so long she had forgotten its name. She pulled her hand away. "You should go home, Ethan." He nodded, stood, and walked to the door. Then he stopped. "Claire." She looked up. "You deserve someone who holds your hand when things fall apart. Not someone who tells you the falling apart was for the best." He left, and Claire sat alone on her office floor and cried until the sunrise painted the windows gold. 2. Confess, if this story is already pulling at your heartstrings, hit that like button right now. Trust me, you are not ready for what happens next. For 2 weeks after that night, Claire avoided Ethan with military precision. She rerouted her schedule. She took different elevators. She buried herself in a massive rebranding campaign for their biggest client. But avoidance only works when the other person cooperates, and Ethan Cole was not cooperating. He started leaving things on her desk. Not romantic gestures, nothing that would raise eyebrows. A sticky note with a quote from a designer she had mentioned admiring. A small sketch of the city skyline he'd drawn during his lunch break. A single sentence on a torn piece of notebook paper. I hope today is kinder to you than yesterday. Each one was a tiny crack in her armor. The breaking point came on a Friday evening during a thunderstorm. The office had emptied early because of severe weather warnings, but Claire had stayed to finalize a pitch deck, and Ethan had stayed because the buses had stopped running and he couldn't afford a rideshare. The power flickered twice, and then the building's backup generators kicked in, bathing the office in dim amber emergency lighting. Claire found Ethan in the break room, staring out the rain-lashed windows at the city below. Lightning illuminated his profile. The sharp jaw, the high cheekbones, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. He turned when he heard her, and his blue eyes caught the lightning's reflection, and Claire felt the last wall inside her crumble to dust. "I can't stop thinking about you," she said. The words came out raw and unplanned and terrifying. "And I need you to tell me to stop, because I don't think I can do it myself." Ethan crossed the room in 3 strides. He stood in front of her, close enough that she could smell cedar and rain on his skin. He was so much taller than her. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He raised one hand and brushed a strand of auburn hair from her freckled cheek, and his touch was so gentle it made her breath catch. "What if I don't want you to stop?" he whispered. "Then we're both in trouble." "Then we're both in trouble," he kissed her. And the storm outside was nothing compared to the one that ignited between them. His hands found her waist, pulling her close against his broad chest, and hers fisted in the fabric of his T-shirt, and for the first time in years, maybe the first time in her entire life, Claire Ashford felt completely, devastatingly alive. They didn't sleep together that night. They sat on the break room floor, with their backs against the vending machine, fingers intertwined, and talked until the storm passed and the city lights reappeared like scattered diamonds. Ethan told her he knew this was complicated. He knew she was married. He knew the age difference would make the world judge them harshly. But he also told her that he had never met anyone who made him feel less alone. "I've been taking care of everyone since I was 15, he said quietly, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "My sister, my mother, myself. But with you I feel like someone actually sees me, not the kid with the dead dad and the broken family. Just me." Claire pressed her forehead against his shoulder and closed her eyes. "This is going to end badly, Ethan." "Probably," he agreed. "But I'd rather have something real that ends badly than spend my whole life having nothing real at all." It was the most reckless, most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to her. The affair began the following week. Secret meetings in her office after hours. Stolen moments in the parking garage. Weekend afternoons at a small cafe in a neighborhood where no one from the company would ever venture. Claire would sit across from Ethan in her flowing blouse and cardigan, her silver locket glinting in the sunlight, and he would sketch her on napkins while she laughed and told him to stop because he was making her self-conscious. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," he said once, so casually that it took her breath away. "Ethan, I'm 40 years old with a body that hasn't seen the inside of a gym since the Obama administration. And," he looked up from his sketch, those blue eyes completely serious, "I didn't say you were perfect. I said you were beautiful. There's a difference. Perfect is boring. Beautiful is the freckle on your left collarbone, and the way you laugh too loud at bad jokes, and how your eyes go soft when you're thinking about something that matters." She reached across the table and took his hand, and she didn't care who saw. But someone did see. Victoria Lang, Claire's vice president of operations, and the most ambitious woman in the company, had been following Claire for 3 weeks. Victoria had suspected something was off when Claire started leaving the office at irregular hours and smiling at her phone during meetings. Victoria had always wanted Claire's position. She had spent 8 years positioning herself as the natural successor. And she was not about to let some teenage intern become an obstacle or an opportunity she failed to exploit. Victoria photographed Claire and Ethan holding hands at the cafe. She photographed them leaving the office together at 11 p.m. She compiled a folder of evidence and waited for the perfect moment to use it. That moment arrived sooner than anyone expected. 2. This, right now, pause for a second. Drop a comment below telling me what you think Victoria is going to do with those photos. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because the next part of this story changes everything. 2. On a Tuesday morning in late August, Claire walked into her office to find Richard sitting in her chair. He never came to the office. In their entire 12-year marriage, Richard Ashford had visited Ashford and Wren exactly 4 times, twice for holiday parties, once for an investor meeting, and once to deliver divorce papers to his first wife, who had worked in the accounting department. The fact that he was here now, sitting behind her desk with his fingers steepled and his expression carved from granite, told Claire everything she needed to know before he said a single word. "Close the door," Richard said. She closed it. He placed a manila envelope on the desk and slid it toward her. Inside were Victoria's photographs. Every single one. Claire and Ethan at the cafe. Claire and Ethan in the parking garage. Claire's hand on Ethan's cheek. Ethan's arm around Claire's waist. And a final photo that made Claire's blood turn to ice. Ethan leaving Claire's house on a Sunday morning, wearing the same clothes he'd arrived in the night before. "Victoria Lang is a very thorough woman," Richard said calmly. "She brought these to me yesterday. She thought I should know that my wife is sleeping with a teenager." Claire couldn't speak. Her throat had closed completely. She stood in the center of her own office, her round face drained of color, her green eyes fixed on the photographs of the most intimate, most tender moments of her life, now weaponized and spread across her desk like evidence at a crime scene. "The prenup is clear," Richard continued, his voice never rising above conversational volume, which somehow made it worse. "Infidelity voids all claims. The company, the house, the accounts, everything reverts to me. My lawyers will have papers drawn up by Friday." He stood and buttoned his suit jacket. "I've also taken the liberty of informing the board. They'll want your resignation by end of week." He walked past her toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Claire, the boy is fired. Effective immediately. Security is escorting him out right now." Claire's paralysis shattered. She ran. She took the elevator to the 14th floor and burst into the creative bullpen, just in time to see 2 uniformed security guards flanking Ethan as he packed his few belongings into a cardboard box. His vintage watch, a sketchbook, a framed photo of his sister. His face was pale beneath his olive complexion, and when he saw Claire, his blue eyes, storm gray now, turbulent and afraid, locked onto hers with desperate intensity. "Claire, what's happening? They won't tell me anything?" "Mom, please step back," one of the guards said. "He's my employee. I'm the CEO. You answer to me." "Actually," said a voice behind her, "they answer to the board now." Claire turned to find Victoria Lang standing there, immaculate in a charcoal blazer, her expression a masterpiece of practiced sympathy that didn't reach her eyes. The board held an emergency session this morning. Claire. Given the circumstances, a CEO engaging in a sexual relationship with a teenage subordinate. They've voted to suspend your authority, pending a full investigation. I've been appointed interim CEO. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Claire's feet. She looked at Victoria and understood, with sickening clarity, that this had never been about morality or protecting the company. This was a coup. Victoria had waited 8 years for this moment, and Claire had handed her the weapon. You planned this, Claire whispered. Victoria tilted her head. I documented the truth. What happens because of the truth isn't my responsibility. Ethan stepped forward, ignoring the guards. This is my fault. Claire didn't. Ethan, don't. Claire's voice was sharp. She turned to him, and for a moment, the entire room fell away. The guards, Victoria, the staring employees, and it was just the two of them, standing in the wreckage of something beautiful. Don't say anything. Not here, please. He searched her face, and she watched his jaw clench. Watched him swallow whatever words he'd been about to say. He picked up his cardboard box, and the guards escorted him toward the elevator. At the doors, he looked back at her one last time. The compass tattoo on his wrist caught the fluorescent light. The elevator doors closed. Claire stood in the silent bullpen, surrounded by employees who wouldn't meet her eyes, and felt 20 years of work dissolve like sugar in rain. Tea. The next 72 hours were the worst of Claire's life. Richard's lawyers served her with divorce papers that evening. The prenuptial agreement was airtight. She had signed it at 28, desperately in love and certain she would never need to worry about its terms. She would lose the house, the investment portfolio, and most devastatingly, her controlling interest in Ashford and Wren. The company she had named, built, and bled for would belong to a man who had never designed a campaign or stayed up until 3 a.m. nursing a client relationship. She moved into a hotel room downtown with a suitcase and her silver locket and nothing else. She didn't call Ethan. She couldn't. Every instinct told her that the kindest thing she could do was disappear from his life entirely. He was 18. He had his whole future ahead of him. The last thing he needed was to be dragged into the radioactive aftermath of her choices. But on the third night, alone in the hotel room at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling and pressing her hand against her still, flat stomach where a new life was quietly growing, her phone buzzed. It was Ethan. I know you're pushing me away. I know you think you're protecting me. But I'm not a kid, Claire. I'm someone who loves you. And love doesn't get to be convenient. Please tell me where you are, Jippy. She typed and deleted 7 different responses. Then she sent him the hotel address. He was there in 20 minutes. When she opened the door, he was standing in the hallway in his leather jacket, dark circles under his blue eyes, rain in his hair. He looked at her, really looked, the way he always did, as though he could see past every layer of armor to the terrified, hopeful, broken woman underneath, and he said, whatever it is, we face it together. Ethan. Her voice cracked. I'm pregnant. The silence lasted 4 seconds, but it felt like 4 years. She watched his face cycle through shock, fear, confusion, and then, impossibly, miraculously, something that looked like wonder. You're serious, he said. I'm serious. He stepped into the room, closed the door behind him, and wrapped his arms around her. She pressed her face against his chest, and his chin rested on top of her auburn hair, and he held her with a steadiness that seemed impossible for someone so young. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, so we're having a baby. Ethan, you're 18. You can't. I've been responsible for a human life since I was 15, he said firmly. I know what it means. And I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Both of you, she cried. She cried harder than she'd cried since the miscarriage. Harder than she'd cried since her mother's funeral. Great heaving sobs that shook her entire body while Ethan held her and stroked her hair and didn't let go. 2. This story is far from over, and the biggest twist hasn't even happened yet. If you're feeling this as deeply as I think you are, smash that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our stories. The investigation at Ashford and Wren concluded 2 weeks later. The board, guided aggressively by Victoria, determined that Claire had violated the company's code of conduct by engaging in a relationship with a subordinate. They formally requested her resignation and offered a modest severance package, a fraction of what her shares were worth. Victoria Lang was confirmed as the new CEO. But Victoria made a critical mistake. In her eagerness to consolidate power, she forgot that Claire Ashford had not built a 200-person company by being naive. During the investigation, Claire hired her own attorney, not a divorce lawyer, but a corporate litigator named Sandra Reeves, who had a reputation for dismantling hostile takeovers, the way a surgeon dismantles tumors. Sandra spent 72 hours reviewing every document, every email, and every board resolution, and what she found changed the trajectory of everything. First, Victoria Lang had accessed Claire's personal email and phone records without authorization to build her surveillance file. This was not only a violation of company policy, but a criminal offense under state wiretapping laws. Second, Richard Ashford's original investment agreement contained a clause buried in the appendix and overlooked by everyone, including Richard's own lawyers, stipulating that the company's intellectual property, client relationships, and brand identity belonged to the founder, not the investors. Richard owned shares. He did not own the company itself. Third, and most explosively, Victoria had been embezzling funds. Sandra discovered a pattern of payments from company accounts to a shell corporation that traced directly back to Victoria's personal holdings. Over 3 years, Victoria had siphoned nearly $800,000. Claire sat in Sandra's office and stared at the evidence laid out before her. The same feeling she'd had 20 years ago. The scrappy, fierce, unbreakable determination that had driven her to build something from nothing, ignited in her chest like a struck match. "What do we do?" Claire asked. Sandra smiled. "We take back your company." The counterattack was swift and devastating. Sandra filed criminal charges against Victoria for embezzlement and unauthorized surveillance. She filed a motion to invalidate the board's removal of Claire, arguing that the board had been manipulated by a criminal actor with a financial conflict of interest. And she challenged the prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause on the grounds that Richard had himself conducted an affair 4 years earlier. A fact Claire had long suspected, but never confirmed until Sandra's investigators produced hotel receipts, text messages, and a statement from the woman involved. Richard's lawyers scrambled. The prenup was mutual. If both parties had committed infidelity, the clause was void, and the divorce would proceed under standard equitable distribution. Richard would keep his investment returns, but Claire would keep her company. The board reconvened. Victoria was arrested. The embezzlement evidence was so overwhelming that 3 other board members, who had supported Victoria's coup, immediately reversed their positions, issuing public apologies to Claire. By the end of October, Claire Ashford was reinstated as CEO of Ashford and Wren. But the victory was hollow until she addressed the one thing that mattered most. 2. On a cool November morning, Claire stood outside Ethan's apartment, a tiny studio above a laundromat in a part of the city she'd never visited before. She was wearing jeans and a soft green cardigan that matched her eyes, and her silver locket hung over her heart, and her hand rested unconsciously on her stomach, where a small but unmistakable curve had begun to form. Ethan opened the door. He looked thinner, tired. The dark circles were still there. But the moment he saw her, those deep blue eyes, ocean blue today, in the autumn light flooded with something so raw and open that it made her chest ache. "Hey," she said. "Hi. I got my company back." I heard. A small smile. It was all over the news. Victoria Langperp walked in a charcoal blazer. Very dramatic. Claire laughed, her real laugh, the loud, unguarded one that Ethan had once told her was his favorite sound in the world. Then she took a breath. "I'm not going to pretend this is normal," she said. "I'm 40. You're 18. I'm your former boss. I'm pregnant. I'm about to be divorced. There are 100 reasons why this shouldn't work, and every single one of them is valid." Ethan leaned against the doorframe and crossed his arms, his vintage watch catching the sunlight. "Are you listing reasons? Or are you saying goodbye?" "I'm listing reasons. And then I'm asking you to ignore all of them. Because I love you, Ethan. I love you in a way I didn't think I was capable of anymore. And I want to try. Really try. Not hiding. Not sneaking around. Just two people who make each other feel less alone in the world." He didn't answer with words. He stepped forward, cupped her round, freckled face in both hands, and kissed her with a tenderness that made the entire noisy, indifferent city seem to go quiet. "I love you too," he said against her lips. "And for the record, I was never going to let you say goodbye." 2. The months that followed were not easy. The world had opinions, and the world was not shy about sharing them. Colleagues whispered. Social media dissected their age difference with surgical cruelty. Claire's own sister told her she was having a midlife crisis. Ethan's friends, the few who remained after the scandal, told him he was being used. But here is what the world didn't see. They didn't see Ethan sitting on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m., holding Claire's hair back during her worst bouts of morning sickness, then making her ginger tea and reading aloud from a pregnancy book he'd bought with money he couldn't spare. They didn't see Claire attending Lily's 8th grade science fair as Ethan's partner, cheering louder than any parent there. Then helping Lily with her college prep applications at the kitchen table while Ethan cooked dinner, badly, but with enormous enthusiasm. They didn't see the night Claire woke up gasping from a nightmare about the miscarriage, and Ethan held her in the dark and said, "This baby is going to be fine. You are going to be fine. And I am going to be right here, every single day." They didn't see the quiet, ordinary, extraordinary moments that built something unshakable between two people the world had decided didn't belong together. The divorce from Richard was finalized in February. It was surprisingly civil. Richard, confronted with the evidence of his own infidelity and the collapse of his moral high ground, accepted an equitable settlement. He kept his investment returns. Claire kept her company. They sold the house and split the proceeds. On the day she signed the final papers, Claire removed her wedding ring and placed it in a drawer, and felt nothing but relief. In March, Ethan enrolled in evening design classes at the community college, paid for with a scholarship Claire helped him apply for, but did not fund. She insisted, and he insisted harder. He was determined to build his own career, his own identity, separate from Claire's company and Claire's world. She admired this more than she could express. In April, they learned the baby was a girl. Ethan cried. He sat in the ultrasound room with the grainy image on the screen and tears rolling down his sharp, beautiful face, and he said, "She's going to have your eyes. I already know it. God, I hope not." Claire laughed through her own tears. "My eyes are too small. Your eyes are perfect. Everything about you is perfect. You said perfect was boring. I was wrong. Perfect is you." On a warm evening in July, Claire went into labor 3 weeks early. Ethan drove her to the hospital in a state of barely controlled panic, running 2 red lights and apologizing to every car he cut off as if the drivers could hear him. Claire, between contractions, managed to say, "If you get us killed before this baby is born, I will haunt you forever." "That's actually kind of comforting," he said. "At least I'd still have you around." She laughed, and then screamed, and then laughed again, and Ethan held her hand so tightly his knuckles turned white. The delivery was difficult. 12 hours of labor. Complications that required intervention. A terrifying 20-minute period when the monitors showed the baby's heart rate dropping and the doctors' faces went tight with professional concern. Ethan never left Claire's side. He stood beside her bed, his hand in hers, his blue eyes locked on hers, and he said the same thing over and over. "I'm here. I'm right here. You're the strongest person I know." At 3:47 a.m., their daughter was born. 6 pounds, 2 ounces, a full head of dark hair, and when she opened her eyes for the first time, they were green, bright, vivid, unmistakable green. "Told you," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking. "Your eyes." They named her Rosemary, Rose for short, after Claire's mother. There is a moment in every love story when the world stops arguing about whether the love is appropriate or logical or socially acceptable, and simply has to acknowledge that it is real. For Claire and Ethan, that moment came on Rose's first birthday. At a small party in the backyard of the modest house they had rented together on the outskirts of the city. Lily was there, now 15 and fiercely protective of her niece. Sandra Reeves was there, holding Rose on her hip and threatening to bill for babysitting at her legal rate. A handful of colleagues from Ashford and Wren were there, the ones who had stood by Claire through the scandal, who had chosen loyalty over gossip. Ethan stood at the grill, wearing a ridiculous apron Lily had given him that said "Wo RLDs OKSTD." Claire sat in a lawn chair with Rose on her lap, watching him argue with a bag of charcoal, and she felt something settle inside her chest, something warm and permanent and unafraid. He caught her looking at him and smiled. That smile slow, slightly crooked, devastating. That had undone her from the very beginning. "What?" he called. "Nothing," she called back. "I just love you. I love you too. Now please help me. I think this grill is broken." "It's not broken. You didn't open the vent." "What vent?" She laughed, loud, unguarded, free, and Rose laughed too, a delighted baby giggle that made everyone in the yard turn and smile. Claire never returned to the corner office on the 32nd floor. She restructured the company to operate with a distributed leadership model, promoted 3 talented women into executive roles, and shifted to a consulting position that let her work from home 3 days a week. She wanted to be present for Rose, for Ethan, for the life they were building together. Ethan completed his design degree in 2 years, graduated with honors, and was immediately recruited by a rival firm. He turned them down. Instead, he launched his own freelance studio, specializing in branding for small businesses and nonprofits. His first major client was a recovery center for families affected by addiction. He designed their entire visual identity pro bono, and the project won a regional design award that sat on the bookshelf next to Rose's baby photos. Their story was never perfect. They argued about dishes and finances and the thermostat. They navigated the complicated terrain of an unconventional family with stumbles and missteps, and occasional spectacular failures. Ethan's mother relapsed twice more, before finally entering a long-term treatment program. Richard remarried and sent a card when Rose was born, which Claire thought was either gracious or passive-aggressive, and decided to interpret as gracious. But every night, when the house was quiet and Rose was asleep in her crib, Ethan and Claire would sit together on the back porch, his arm around her soft shoulders, her head against his chest. And they would listen to the crickets and the distant hum of the city and the steady rhythm of each other's breathing. And Claire would touch the silver locket around her neck, her mother's locket, and she would think about all the things she had lost and all the things she had found. And she would know, with absolute certainty, that the finding had been worth every single moment of the losing. 2. Some love stories are neat. They follow rules. They match people by age and background and social expectation, and they unfold like plotted novels with predictable chapters and satisfying, tidy endings. This was not that kind of love story. This was the kind of love story that catches fire in the least expected place, between the least expected people, at the least expected time. The kind that forces you to choose between and the life you planned and the life that's choosing you. The kind that the world will judge and whisper about and never fully understand. But here is what Claire Ashford learned. Standing in the wreckage of everything she thought she wanted and discovering something infinitely more real. Love is not a number. It is not an age or a title or a socially acceptable arrangement. Love is the person who sits on the floor with you at midnight and makes you feel less alone. Love is the hand that reaches for yours when everything is falling apart. Love is choosing to stay when leaving would be so much easier. And sometimes, the most terrifying, most inappropriate, most inconvenient love of your life turns out to be the truest thing you've ever known. Sir, if this story moved you, if it made you think about the nature of love and courage and second chances, then leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Like this video so others can find it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that remind you that life's most beautiful chapters often begin on the pages you never planned to write. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late and never too unlikely to find the love that changes everything.